Dr. Camayd-Freixas, you've been involved in the court systems of the United States as an interpreter for a long time. You've witnessed many hearings, and you know that it's generally accepted that our immigration system is broken in one way or another. What do you think are its current faults?
My main concern is that it leads to violations of human rights, denial of due process. All the protections that are afforded to criminals in our criminal courts are not afforded to immigration detainees. None of the Bill of Rights guarantees that are built into our Constitution and that are one of the pillars of our democracy are available to them. So as a result of the enforcement tactics, the criminalization of migrants and the their lack of protection and due process under immigration law, we are undermining our own democracy, our own democratic principles, and American values. The visa processing, for example, is so backlogged and so inadequate that we measure it now in generations. It takes people 20 years easily to get their visa application processed. In addition to that, the quotas are insufficient. They're insufficient in terms of family reunification visas and other visas. They're particularly insufficient for workers' visas, the H-2A and H-2B programs, for example, one for agricultural and the other one for non-agricultural workers.
What bothers you the most in terms of human costs?
What bothers me the most is the human cost on children. In the case of Postville is particularly telling because the American children, for example, in the Postville elementary and middle school started suffering from post-traumatic stress, having nightmares that their parents too would be taken away. They suffered the loss of a third of their classmates overnight, and they still have not recovered. Of course, some of the parents of children were arrested and deported. So now we have divided families. Now we have children who have not seen their parents ever since May 12th. Also, there were many who were not arrested because, in fact, the authorities had almost 700 arrest warrants, but they only arrested about almost 400 people because it was the early shift at the plant. There was another shift that hadn't even come in yet. So as a result, you had hundreds of people who took their children out of school and just fled, just ran in any direction. And then there were approximately 400 people, 400 to 500 people who hid inside St. Bridget's Catholic Church. And they were terrified while the Black Hawk helicopters hovered overhead. They refused to leave for days on end. They refused to let their children go to school. But also, immediately when the word of the raid came out through town, and that took very little, it's a very small town, people started hiding children in basements. And there were children hidden in basements for up to 2 weeks. Because after the raid, there were still fears that immigration officers were still roaming around, and in fact they were. They came back several times. I visited Postville in October. The raid was in May, and I was warned by several Iowans there, natives of the town, that there were people in plain clothes going around town, a lot of strangers, and that some of them were immigration officers in plain clothes that were also investigating. So the atmosphere in the town was just terrible.
You also went to Guatemala. What were the conditions of those people, and how did they respond to what had happened to them?
Well, we have to understand that these are very poor communities. The impact is tremendous. Many of these families, they just live in shacks. One family, the parents and several kids in each shack, and then the extended family. Sometimes they would have little compounds of 4 or 5 shacks where, you know, the brother and brother families and the parents or the grandparents live and so forth. So they're very, very rustic. Now, they're going back to a Guatemala that, on top of it all, has had a few 100,000 people deported from the United States. In 2008, 28,000 were deported by air and 75,000 by land. These people are looking for work in Guatemala, and there isn't any. And then the drop in remittances has affected the communities to such an extent that you know, money is not circulating. So the people even who stayed there, who never migrated anywhere, are hurting because of the lack of remittances.
It makes them vulnerable to recruiters as well, does it not? That these recruiters may be providing false information and may be abusing these people.
Absolutely. The labor recruiting system in Mexico and Central America in particular is completely corrupt. And there are Americans as well as Mexicans and Central Americans participating in it. The way it works is that they charge the workers substantial amounts of money to get them a work permit, a visa, and a job, to hook them up with an employer in the United States. And many times, because the number of visas is very limited, those who cannot buy the visas are then passed over directly to the coyotes so that they can come illegally.
What do you think is happening in the U.S. because of these problems?
Well, I think that in the U.S. ever since September 11th, 2001, we've had the misguided idea that immigration is a matter of national security. And there are two different things. What we deal with in terms of migration, mostly from Latin America, and I have to say 90% of illegal immigrants in the United States come from Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, those 4 countries. That's labor migration. Labor migration has very unique characteristics that are similar all over the world. It's a global issue. They have absolutely nothing to do with national security. So we have to separate the agendas. This is security and this is immigration. Because of that conflation of the two after 9/11, we've poured tons of money into national security. And a lot of that money has actually gone into immigration enforcement. The result is that they were supposed to arrest and deport criminal aliens. But the truth of the matter is that in 2007, for example, only 9% of those arrested and deported had any kind of criminal record, and 91% were common workers. So we're taking people who are hard workers and who are contributing to the economy, and we're taking them out of work, putting them in jail at taxpayers' expense, and going through this whole very expensive process of arrest, detention, and processing and deportation, all at taxpayers' expense.